Welcome to Wealth Well Done. Together, we'll cover a wide range of important topics surrounding money and the impact it has on our lives. From the sophisticated and highly valuable planning techniques of the ultra-wealthy to the commonly underutilized biblical teachings. Together, we'll work to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well. Here's your host, Eric Scoville.
Welcome to the, 63rd episode of the Wealth Well Done podcast, where we lean into the tactical, practical, and spiritual advice to help you do your wealth well done. And like we've been elaborating more on here lately, that wealth well done, my good and faithful servant. That's really what we're after. That's the goal for this life, that we run it hard. We all have our own race. We all have the different plan that the Lord has for our life, and we are just trying to do that to the best we can. He knows that we're not gonna ace that test by any means, but we want to do the best we can to the point where at the end of this we hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Last week we had Eric Cabral on. Eric is the founder of On Air Brands, the folks who produce this podcast and distribute that. And we had a fantastic conversation talking about what happens when you really let the Lord become Lord of your life and not just staying on the periphery of your life like so many of us do today, especially kind of in Western Christian, the Western Christian lens. But today I am excited here with Daniel Del Real. Daniel is a connection that Eric Cabral actually made here, and you are a massive mover in the real estate business, especially in California. And you have you just told me this, you have the number one large team in California, but you don't make up a large team. It's I was on your website looking at the number of people. When you said that you got a large team, that first all of a sudden just said like, well, no, it doesn't seem like that would be a large team compared to other people there. So number one in California there with incredible rankings. And I'm excited to talk about a number of the things that you are doing here. But Daniel, thank you for joining this podcast.
Man, Eric, I love this conversation, man. Even the conversations we've had prior to jumping on this, you could definitely tell your heart's in the right place, man. And even having a podcast like this, what Eric is doing, amplifying our voices. It's beautiful to see it done, especially when you're talking about faith and you're talking about the stewardship of finances. Because, like, if you really think about it, like you and I are pretty ordinary dudes, but whenever we're doing it and we have Christ in what we're doing, we're extraordinary. And that's what's really cool about it, because you see what Eric's doing, you see what you're doing, and if you let the Lord lead, it's amazing what we can accomplish, what we can actually do.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with you. I think it'd be good to get started here, and maybe I'll share a few of the other accolades just to talk about this, because I don't imagine that that's something that you normally lead with, but I'd like to hear about how your ordinary has become extraordinary. But yeah, so we were looking up some stats on you guys and saw that the number one team within PMZ for 13 years and counting. And then now what you've talked about here of, well, I guess, first of all, like the certified residential specialist in top 3% of realtors nationwide, the number of homes you've sold, the rankings by Wall Street Journal as the number 10 team there. And that was a while ago. And so now you guys have, surpassed that. And then you've also got, you've racked it up on the investment side too. So when it comes to credibility to this conversation, you are living it out in your business. You're living it out at home. You are living this out in your personal finances here. So you said you got 150 doors. You're well into the 8 figures in terms of real estate that's under your belt. You have your own TV show now as well. So you are doing very extraordinary things, but you started from an ordinary background here. What can you give us a little bit of your backstory?
Yeah, well, I'm a product of immigrant parents. Left everything they knew, took a faith walk, came to the U.S., ended up getting their citizenship in the late 90s while I was a teenager. So I got the privilege of seeing that firsthand. My dad always said, when you see the street, you don't see pavement, you see opportunity. And and that's one of the things that we always have to look at is sometimes we hedonically adapt to all the blessings we have around us, right? And having a front row seat to my parents coming here, and him seeing what a lot of people would see struggle, he saw opportunity, and how him and my mom built what they were able to build here for us, and the opportunities they gave us for us to, I served in the military for a few years in the Air Force. My brother did as well. My brother ended up, we all did, you know, they definitely started and opened the door for us. And we definitely elevated it when it came down to like, finding opportunity for us here, and how to amplify our skill sets. I didn't learn English until I was 10, which was another, I would say, a blessing. Even though when I got into the school system, I was, when you can't articulate yourself, people just naturally think you're stupid, right? It was such a blessing to think of that initial struggle, right? Because um, I couldn't serve, or I couldn't show what I knew with my voice. So I had to do it in my actions. So that's where I really learned a lot of the stewardship, meaning, I had to serve my teachers a little more. I had to serve my classmates just because they didn't know that I actually knew a lot, right? I couldn't articulate my. So that's where like that servant's heart really came from. And fortunately, I was able to, as I channeled that into sports, and then I went into, the military, where one of the things about the military, you're in service to this country, and you're going in to defend the Constitution. But in order for you to defend it, you actually have to let it go. Like, you release your constitutional right in order to be able to defend the constitutional right. And that's very biblical too. You think of,
Yeah.
if the passage where, if you're those who fight to gain their life will actually lose it, right?
Right.
And it's
Absolutely.
interesting, even in service, where you go in to defend this constitutional right, and then in return you have to actually release your own constitutional right, because for that time you're property of the U.S. government, and you're fighting. You don't have the freedom to say, I'm not going to engage in this, or I'm not going to do all that, right? So that servitude took me into the military, and then I happened to get my degree in criminal justice. But I gave this thing called real estate a shot, and 20 years later, I'm still here. And literally, you talk about us being the number one team in the state of California for literally, we've dominated about a decade. And I think of like, well, the reason why that is because we've done it with service. Like, all our business is service oriented. That's all we do. We don't really sell houses. We just serve people. And we just happen to be helping them and guiding them through real estate. And one of the things that, I talk to my team about is, it's amazing to live life in gratitude. Like, very grateful for what you have and God's provided for you. And living life in gratitude opens up doors of opportunity. But I tell them, like, if you live life in servitude, it kicks the freaking door down, right? So it's like, if you go out and serve as many people as you can, um, in return, like, you're going to accomplish anything that you really want. So our business is almost 50% referral business. So there's a gravitational pull in our business. There's a lot of goodwill. We're the highest reviewed team in the whole Central Cal. But we've done that all through service, and just being very just very disciplined in what we do with our time and how we do things. And when you look at just my team, looking at even ourselves, just like we talked about a little earlier, is we're pretty ordinary people, right? But we're able to do pretty extraordinary things because of the systems and processes we have in place, and then the accountability and support we have one another, and that's the beauty of what we've done. Like, our team, we have one of our core values is teamwork, and another one's accountability. And when you really look at accountability, they have these statistics of people that say, well, if you want to achieve a certain goal, if you make it, number one, if you make it time bound, there's a certain percentage that you're able to achieve that goal. There's maybe a 20% chance if you make it time bound that you'll achieve it. Most people will set an intention, and by the end of the first month, it's over, right? But if you make it time bound, then there's a 20% chance. And if you make it, if you break down the behaviors and how you're going to achieve that goal, then there's like a 35% chance. If you share it with somebody like Eric, where you're like, hey, I'm going to accomplish this goal, there's like a 50% chance you're going to have or be able to achieve that goal. But if you have a specific accountability with somebody saying, Eric, I want to meet with you in 30 days and I want to talk to you about my commitments and where I'm at with this, then there's a 95% probability of accomplishing that goal. So our team is very accountable to that. We're accountable to one another. We're accountable to our clients. But it's beautiful because you look at like our faith walk and how important our faith walk is when you really have a relationship with Christ, that's the highest level of accountability that you could possibly have. Like the highest level of accountability, right? It's, what you do in the day is seen in the night, right? What you do when others aren't looking. So when I look at that, I'm like, man, if you have a business rooted in faith and a lot of your goals and dreams are rooted in faith, accountability is really, really high, right? And you're like, and doing it the right way and doing it not your way, but God's way, right? And I think when you look at that, you're like, okay, that's definitely for me a secret sauce. Like it gives me patience, it gives me grace, right? It gives me the ability to submit to the greater plan of why are we doing this, right? So anyways, but a lot of that came from a lot of the lessons I learned earlier in life, being a product of immigrant parents.
You just gave us 20 different topics to talk about there. So I'm going to try to think through the lens of someone listening here, hearing about the success that you guys are having, that you have had, and you continue to sustain. Because obviously, nothing in the kingdom of God is overnight. It's first the blade, then the ear, then the full corn in the ear. It is he developed something. If you Proverbs talks about this, you get rich quick, it's not going to last. And so what you have has lasted, but it has come through a lot of hard work. So you've curated a culture, it sounds like, inside the Del Rio group that is very Christian, whether all of your employees are Christian or not. So can you talk a little bit about how you have curated that culture, and when you're hiring someone, how are you, are you screening for faith, or what are you doing there to protect the culture?
Yeah, we're not screening for faith because we know that it's interesting because even some of the team members that we have were non-believers, and over 5-6 years you start asking these questions, right? And they're like, hey, so they don't even start asking your questions in a way of, there's things that are taught by a voice and there's things that are caught by your actions, and they're like, how is it that you act this way, or you solve problems this way, or you have grace in this way, or you have this servitude in this way? And then it's hard to answer that question without your faith. And somebody that knows you long enough is going to have a front row seat in your faith. So I have team members that weren't believers that are walking through their faith walk now, right? They're going to church, and you're like, they're reading faith-based books. We have a Bible study that we're doing, and you're like, man, it's beautiful to see that. But we really hire based on core values, right? The values and the principles of a person. And if those align with us, then we bring them into our world. I always tell my team a couple things, and I tell my son this too. I'm like, there's 3 things in your life you should spend a lot of time discerning on, right? Number 1 is who you marry, because you're going to spend a lot of time with that person and spend a lot of part of your life with that person. Number 2 is where you work or who you work with, because you're going to spend about a third of your life there, right? A big chunk of your day, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And then the third thing is what mattress you sleep on, because you just spend the third day there, right? But those are the 3 things I always say. Like, you have to have a lot of prayer behind. You have to really, really do your due diligence on, because we're going to spend a lot of time with these people, right? But we try to hire based on core values. And the beautiful thing about it is, as we bring them in, we help them create measurable goals, and we don't even call them goals anymore. We call them commitments, right? What commitments are you, like what commitments do you want to have for the year? What vision do you have for 5 years? And then in return, we make them more behavior based, because a lot of people, it's not like they lack motivation to do things. Like a lot of people have motivation. I think we're motivation overloaded right now. What they lack is clarity on how to take the first steps, and because they don't have clarity on that, they just don't take the step. And so what we help them do is really provide clarity on what kind of behaviors they need to have in order to be able to meet those goals. And there's this illustration that I have with my 10-year-old son now, but he's 8, and and I show my team this picture of my son. He built this the Infinity Gauntlet, which is the golden glove with all the stones that is supposed to reset time. And he built it out of Legos, and on the box it says 18 and over, and he did it when he was 8. And when you look at this box of Legos, there's thousands of pieces in there, and I'm like, man, isn't that life, right? Like, you're standing and you're seeing everybody's highlight reel with them. Look at what I've just accomplished, right? And you're like, okay, when you really look at Legos, you look at how can an 8-year-old build something like that? And I asked them, I'm like, look, if I put my 8-year-old against 5 of the brightest MIT graduates to build this Infinity Gauntlet, and with the 5 MIT graduates, I took all the instructions away. I opened up all the bags, put all the Lego pieces in a box, shook them all up, gave them the visual of what I wanted them to build. And then I put them against my 8-year-old, but he had the bags the way they should be. He had clear instructions by the Legos of what that looks like. Who do you think would win? And they're like, well, the 8-year-old would win. Yeah, absolutely, right? So what's the difference? Like, we got 5 of the brightest here. The difference is he has clear instructions on how to be faithful to keep putting all these Lego pieces in. And as he goes through page 1 to page 30, the product doesn't look like the Infinity Gauntlet. You're just putting pieces together. There's actually a lot of confusion. And every once in a while, you open up a new bag that gives you a different color, and it sparks you up again, right? And sometimes you have to pull pieces off because you did something wrong, and then re-engage it again. And sometimes you'll have dad come in and help you take some pieces off and put some pieces on. But it allows him to be faithful that he's going to go page by page. And at the end of it, he's going to have this big, beautiful Infinity Gauntlet, right? And so it's not like they don't have the visual of what they want to build or what he wants to build. The thing is he has clear instructions how to do it. And he's aware that progress might not look like progress. As you look through the hundreds of pages, it does look like, okay, this looks exactly like the last 5 pages, right? And so how funny his life is. Sometimes, like, after another, looks like, am I really making progress? Like, but every once in a while, like, life will give you a new bag with a new color, and you're like, whoa, okay, right? So you have to be faithful to that vision of what you're going to build. You have to give yourself clear instructions, right, to that. And you have to know that you have to be disciplined, and you have to make sure that sometimes progress doesn't look like progress. But so that's the difference when you look at, okay, what do we do here in our team that makes us extraordinary? Is we give ourselves clear instructions. We have a massive amount of accountability. We're faithful to the plan. We're submissive to our future plan, our future goals. We don't have goals. We actually have commitments. What commitments do we have? And we're just busy putting puzzle pieces together. And when we look up, we're going to have this big, beautiful thing that we've built that most people will say, wow, that's amazing. Like, how did you do that?
How do I get there, next year?
Yeah.
Right. Or sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's the issue that we run into so much is we want to now, we're not willing to do the work.
Yeah. But look at your faith walk. So sometimes you deal with that with people too. Like, you think of, Lord, I've been so faithful to you. Like, I'm praying all the time. I'm doing all these things. Like, why don't I have this? Why don't I have that breakthrough? Why doesn't it look like progress? You know what I mean? Like, sometimes even in your faith walk, sometimes you can't tell what kind of progress you're making, right? Um, but every once in a while, you have that breakthrough where you're like, oh man, okay. And when you look up, you're like, okay, I've really built something amazing. Just like what you said, like, but sometimes they say like a faith that's untested is a faith that can't be trusted, right? Like we have to work on constantly building a stronger back so we could withstand, the pressures that the world's going to put on us, and sometimes that our own success is going to put on us, right? And that's why wealth is built over a long period of time, right?
Right. Well, yeah. The inside that faith, that hasn't been tested idea. I often think about Joseph, and he's a very easy one to consider here. And as you were building, the Del Rio group, I'm sure 20 years ago, I'd love to hear what your goals or your commitments were then, but I'm sure you faced issues that made it look like this isn't progress here, or this page looked just like the last page. Joseph is obviously the easiest example to consider here. He's doing great at home, and then he gets, in essence, demoted to slavery, and then to prison, and just the way that God uses him and develops him. We don't hear about his inner thought life during those times. We don't know, the frustration he had with God. We don't know. We don't hear about that. If he did, or maybe he was just this perfect case of humility all the way through that said, "Okay, God, this is great. I trust you." I put myself into his shoes and thought about how I would respond there if things are going great and I am humbly pursuing him, and then it all of a sudden looks like I take a huge step backwards. I would realize just how much pride I still had there, how much control I was still trying to exercise, instead of really letting God. And so with that, I decided here, honestly, I decided a year and a half ago that I was done focusing on trying to get comfortable, because so much of what we do is try to build comfort. Even the people on your team who are making these commitments to try to hit certain metrics, a lot of it might be financially driven, that I want to hit this level of income because I want to, because at that point I no longer need to check the price on something when I go to buy, or I no longer have to focus on drive this beat up car, whatever people have. We have these different focuses, and so much of it seems like we are trying to get to a state of comfort. And I looked at this and said, no one in the Bible who is worth mentioning, there are bad characters in the Bible, but none of the good characters in the Bible did anything that was comfortable. I just finished through Esther, or Esther, Nehemiah, like, these things that I'm going through there, like nothing about that was comfortable. Like, Esther has to go put her life on the line there. And even when she got accepted into this group of women who were going to be potentially chosen, it still took a year of her before she got to go before the king. And she had to go through the extra work there. And then to have to put her, well, now that she's in this position, now Mordecai says, all right, go put your life on the line. Like, it's just nothing comfortable seems like that is God. And if I could do it out of comfort, if I could do it my own, do I really need God? And so I've just basically given that over to him and said, hey, you take it. You take it. I no longer am making comfort an idol in my life, which is, is very difficult to say. And I guess kind of a dangerous prayer. I'm getting used to making those dangerous prayers, but I think that faith untested piece, of being a faith that's unfit for use, like that's absolutely right. And now when you willing to be tested and you go through it, you go through the hardships, it's no longer focused on the 6 inches in front of my face, but it's now, Lord, what are you doing with the bigger picture? Because I trust you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. I think there's, sometimes when you feel you're buried, like you're really actually just being planted. So you got to think that you're like, all right, I had a conversation and I had dinner with John Maxwell, right? And people always ask him these deep questions. So, somebody at our table asked, like, what's the question that you've interviewed so many successful people, so many presidents, influencers, world influencers, the most affluent people in the world. What's the question that you usually like go to when you're asking them questions to kind of get all these gems? He's like, a lot of people want to talk about like their successes, but I'd ask them, I usually ask them what the biggest lessons that they've learned. And I try to get through that part of it. He's like, and what I realized that their biggest lessons always came from failure. So I'm like, the greatest people in the world. So you think like we're so afraid to fail, but yet on the other side of that failure, there's a lesson, right? And I talk about even like we talk about the 4 C's of learning, right? Number one, you have to commit to do something bigger. Like I'm going to commit to build this business. So I'm going to commit to follow, like even start my faith walk. And then the second C after commitment is courage. You got to earn your courage. And in order for you to earn your courage, you got to walk in some form of fear, right? You got to face fear to earn this courage. But if you do that, then you learn what you're capable of. Am I capable? Like you, even this podcast, like I commit to this, man, this is scary, right? But then you're earning this courage. And then now you're on the other side of learning what you're capable of. And eventually you're going to get to the subconscious competence of like mastery. And you're like, okay, I'm what's my capability here? Right. What's my capacity? Like you learn what you're capable of. And then what's your capacity here? How far can my voice go? And then once you get there, then you'll end up saying, all right, do I want to wear this mastery as a warm sweater and stay here? Or do I do this 4 C's again? And you see business owners do this all the time. They say, okay, I commit to a bigger life, which means I have to step into a new level of fear, which means I have to learn a new capability and in a new capacity. Those 4 C's, it's commitment, courage, capability, capacity. And then at that point, like you're always doing that. And I feel like even in your faith walk, it's always the same thing. Like you feel like, that's why I always say that I feel like I'm a new believer, because I feel like I'm always getting called to step into a new level of fear, where I'm just like, all right, God, where are you taking me here? Like, what lessons am I learning here? Um, but some of the greatest lessons I've learned has been that, and that's one of the things that like when we homeschooled our kids for 5 years, that's what I wanted to show them is like Dad's always chasing this fear and earning courage, right? Um, and that's something that whenever I talk to a lot of people that are building their business in real estate, even investors, right? Investors do the same thing. Like, am I capable of, say, investors usually start with single family homes and then they move up to multifamilies and then they go to these big apartments. And sometimes when you start with those big apartments, you don't have the lessons that you learned in the single family that would give you that strong back to be able to like a lot of lessons I learned there. Yeah, I could implement them up here. And even when you're investing, the first thing you have to do is you have to commit that this is what I want to do. I want to buy these investments, and why you need to have this bigger vision and plan. There's going to be a level of fear as you're making these decisions. Then as you buy these properties, am I capable of making these work? What's my capacity here when it comes down to like the money that I have available, whatever. And then you'll see yourself doing these 4 C's again as you elevate asset classes. Like we did that, we had 80 California doors. And then in 2017, we sold half of them and moved into a bigger asset class, which meant that I had to step into that fear and earn that courage and find a new level of capability and capacity as I'm learning a new asset class. I find that we're constantly doing that in business, and we're constantly doing that in our faith. And that's one of the beautiful things that I got from John Maxwell. He's like, man, it's like, why am I sometimes running away from what will be the greatest lesson of my life?
As an athlete, or from a military standpoint, we can get like, if we go do these drills, or whether that's that, I'm thinking drills from a military standpoint, but even from an athletic standpoint, drills, practice, I go to the gym, I hit this, I understand that if I do this, the output on the other side is I am better. I'm better, I'm stronger, I'm more capable. In life, though, we don't get to shut the drill off. And so it's a lot more, it takes a lot more faith, it takes a lot more courage, because I don't get to into the gym and then decide, okay, that's enough. I'm going to stop now. And I think that that's really hard, whether it's investing or otherwise. Um, Before we wrap up this podcast, I want to talk a little bit about taking risk then, because what you're describing here, the guy who started our church, he talks about that faith is sometimes spelled RISK. And so when you talk about the risk that you're taking on or that you're helping a client do as a client's trying to get into investing, investment properties, or taking that next step up in that, how are you framing risk, whether for yourself or for someone else, or even an employee? How are you framing risk to help people kind of make sure that they've got the mettle to withstand the adversity?
Yeah, now, a lot of it is seeing the horizon. I think a lot of the risk, when you come down to real estate, give it enough time, you win any game, right? And sometimes you're getting, you're getting advice from finite people when you have an infinite game, right? Like, and in your faith walk, like, hey man, I have an infinite game here. Like, my job is to get to heaven, get my family to heaven, get as many people as I can to heaven. I'm not going to take finite advice because it's in the now, right? In return, it's going to cost me my infinite reward in heaven, right? And so when I deal with risk, I number one, say, okay, what's your long-term horizon here, right? And like I said, I got firsthand to see this from an immigrant that bought his first house, and I saw home values go up and down. I saw his emotional roller coaster go up and down, and I've had enough time to see that his properties got paid off. Like, at the end of the day, like, it doesn't matter what the book value is. You have an infinite long-term plan. So what is that long-term plan? I always talk about, I have an aggressive swing, but I pick a safe line. Right? When it talks about baseball analogy, right? I'm gonna have an aggressive swing, but I got a safe line. I'm gonna go this line, right? And so I usually talk about your horizon. Like, what's the horizon? What's the end goal here? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And because that keeps you faithful to constantly keep moving forward when you don't see progress right away, right? When you see, okay, where's the lesson here as I'm going through fear, and I'm like, okay, you feel like you're being buried, right? The whole buried versus planted, right? It takes time underground to be able to see, okay, am I going to bear fruit? What kind of shade am I going to provide? Like, what kind of fruits am I going to bear? So I usually look at saying, okay, what is your horizon? Like, where do you want to be? What game are you playing? And making sure that you're taking advice from people that have that infinite game, right? Like, and not the finite. I think sometimes it's good advice, even if it's finite, but if you're playing a different, if you have a different timeline, then it's a little different for you, right? So
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And the analogy of bearing fruit is one I think of a lot, because when I first got into this, really into this discipleship journey, and I encountered a healing, and for myself, I had a spiritual healing myself. The mentor of mine said, "Okay, great. Now go down to the hospital and clear it out." And he was obviously joking about this, but saying, you know, that's one that's a little bit, your trunk grew stronger. So you were a seedling. A seedling can get plucked up at any point. It doesn't take a strong person to pluck up a seedling, but as that tree gets stronger and keeps, the roots keep getting deeper, the trunk keeps getting larger, keeps getting more stabilized in a storm or anything else like that, eventually it has the shade, eventually it has the fruit to bear. Now it can give to others. But a tree can't give to others early on in its walk. And it doesn't mean that as someone who's in their faith journey can't give. They can serve, and through service they're going to grow and strengthen that. But I've always liked that analogy. You gotta wait till you really have fruit to bear before you start trying to go out and convince the world of whatever it is that you're thinking right now.
Yeah, there's a thing that Adam and Eve had it called, and like, it's in Genesis, right? And there's a lot of people right now, it's very dangerous. It's called communicative knowledge, right? There's communicative knowledge versus revealed knowledge. And the difference is a big difference. There's so many people walking around listening to so many podcasts and books, and they have all this communicative knowledge on how to invest or how to do certain things. And but there's a different thing when life punches you in the face, and like, how does the blood taste? How does it feel? How do I respond in moments of fear, right? In adversity, when my life is on the line, or and my money's on the line, or whatever that looks like, or and that's revealed knowledge, like what happens with that. And look at Adam and Eve's story. Like, Adam had revealed knowledge. God said, do not eat from this specific tree. And Eve had communicative knowledge from Adam. And it's different, right? So, like, how are you getting revealed knowledge? And even in your faith walk, like, how does that happen where it becomes muscle memory for you? I raced Ironman for a long time, and people would ask, are you ready for your race? I'm like, man, it's like saying, am I ready to get kicked in the nuts? Like, you're never ready for a race. You're prepared to execute at the level and time you've invested in that preparation. And I'm going to execute my race according to my plan and the time I've invested into it. Your faith is the same way. Are you ever ready for your faith to be tested? Are you ever ready for your relationship with your spouse to be tested? Are you ever ready for your business to be tested? I would say you're never ready for it, but you're prepared to execute. And when you're running this race in Ironman, people say, where do you go in your mind? I mean, you get 10 hours of racing, and like, you got 2.4 miles on a swim, 112 miles on a bike, a full marathon afterwards, and you go to muscle memory. You go to the subconscious competence of this 4 C's of learning, right? And when your heart, when your mind, when your body is telling you to stop, your mind, you almost subconsciously just shut off, and you go right into all the 500 hours of training that you put in for a 10-hour race. Put these 500 hours of training for a 10-hour race. So how does that look like in your faith walk? Are you spending the 500 hours in training and speaking to God and being in scripture, right? Are you spending that time with your spouse and connecting with them and going on date nights and sharing your dreams and sharing that time for you to be tested when one day you're having cocktails with a couple friends and the opposite sex approaches you, and then you're like, okay, how much you're going to respond at the level of preparation and time that you spent with your spouse? Like, when your kids get challenged and they have 2 people to call, are they going to call their father? I would say that's going to depend on the level of time you've invested with your children, right? And so sometimes of that tree, we look at the tree, we look at the fruit, but we look at the roots. Okay, so how much time are you investing in that? Do you have that revealed knowledge? And like, how's my body going to respond when I'm on mile 22 of a marathon on hour 9, when my body's failing, my mind is failing, my heart's like going crazy here? It's going to go back to all those lessons I learned while I was getting revealed knowledge, and I was going on those long runs, and I was doing those brick workouts, and I was doing those efforts and doing all that stuff. Like, and in order for you to find your edge and find how you're going to respond to that, you got to you have to do it in practice. Like, how am I going to show up when my body fails in practice? And you got to learn those lessons there, and you got to realize, how is it that I'm going to respond? In the military, we used to say, look, it's okay to be scared, man. Like, something wrong if you're not scared. It's okay to be scared. It's actually normal to be scared. It's not okay to panic, right? You can't panic, but panic will get you killed. And in the military, we would say, like, I was a cop in the military, and there's some of the times you'd have to clear buildings, right? You're doing this training, you're clearing buildings, and you do training after training, clearing these buildings with your guys, and why do you do all this training, right? And we usually would say, we're like, look, the guy that can't silence the gunshots is the guy that's going to end up in a body bag, or you're going to end up getting your guys killed. And so whenever you go through a kick down a door, you go through a building, and bullets start flying, like, your mind is going to do 2 things. It's either going to panic, or it's going to go into muscle memory of all the training that you do. You know what the guy at your 12 o'clock is doing. You know what the guy in the 6 is going to do. Every once in a while, if you freeze, the guy behind you is going to say, go, 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 right? And then he's going to kick you right back into how you clean those rooms. It's all muscle memory. You're going to rely on the guy in the back, guy in the front, and you silence the gunshot, right? And and you visualize what the mission is, you know, and you visualize what you guys are going to do. You rehearse it, you practice it in order for you to get yourself in, get yourself out when your life is on the line or when all hell has broken loose. You keep that calmness in those moments. And life is the same way. Like, how do you silence the gunshots of life? Right? Because what is a gunshot in life? Social media, news, an election that's happening, COVID, it's earthly desires, right? How do you silence all those gunshots, right? You have to be, where you're spending your time, right? And what are you practicing? Like, what are you doing whenever those gunshots start happening, where your mind goes into muscle memory saying, no, that's a gunshot. That's a distraction. It doesn't align with what my vision is. That clarity that I have, the clear instructions that I have, that infinite goal that I have to get to heaven or to build this portfolio, to build this amazing business. Like, if it doesn't align with those things, it's a gunshot. It's a silence. You silence it, and then you use those principles and values and that goal and those visions as your filter on what you say yes to, what you say no to, and who you allow into your world.
This is good. We've got to cut this episode off, but Daniel, this is really good. So we're going to pick this right back up with episode 2 with Daniel here. Thank you for being on. Thank you for sharing the wisdom, and for any listeners here, we hope you'll join us again next week to hear more about this as we're going to go drill in deeper here. So thank you, Daniel.
Thank you again for listening to Wealth Well Done. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player, and together we'll continue to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well.